LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to this special LiberalViewer vice presidential debate clip roundup that I've titled Kamala Harris versus Mike Pence and Fly. Thanks for joining me. This is the only 2020 vice presidential debate between Vice President Mike Pence and Senator Kamala Harris. It was definitely more boring and less consequential than the first Trump versus Biden debate, which they're now renegotiating might end up being the only presidential debate, but somehow I think we'll have at least one more debate that I'll be able to do a debate clip roundup for you. I'm going to show you four pretty long, like 5 to 6 minute clips from the vice presidential debate, and then a really short one. Altogether, about 20 to 25 minutes of the 90-minute debate that I'll be showing you to sort of give you a strong flavor of what happened, though really I don't know if that much of consequence happened. They say vice presidential debates don't matter that much. They kept building this one up because both Trump and Biden are in their 70s, and Trump, of course, is sick with COVID-19, so you would think the vice president would matter more. Thank you, Matthew. Late as usual. I just started a few minutes late, but I had to delay a little bit. It's hard to. This is like not the day I usually do my live stream, but you're throwing me off my introduction here. I'm also, in addition to those 20 to 25 minutes of debate clips I'm going to show you, I'm then going to show you the reaction from all five of the big five corporate outlets: ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. I will keep playing the clips at least as long as it takes them to mention the fly. Oh, that's what I was going to talk about when I saw the Super Chat contribution from Matthew, which I appreciate Super Chat contributions for the live show. I've also put links down in the video description for direct PayPal contributions and for Patreon patrons. There's also a join button down there if you want to support what I'm doing here, adding my media criticism and political commentary to those big five corporate outlets. The political comedy is kind of the fly that landed on Mike Pence's head for, almost 3 minutes of the debate, and it was mentioned by 4 of the 5 corporate outlets. I watched the ABC commentary through like 2 commercial breaks, and then it cut to my local news, so I'm not sure if they ever got to the fly, but they never mentioned the fly, although they did mention his like pink eye, which came up, which might be more important and came up in one of the other commentaries I'll show you. So yeah, I'll show you all 5 of the big 5 corporate outlets, what they said right after the debate, at least until they mentioned the fly. And basically, I don't think anyone won. I mean, maybe the fly won, because if this vice presidential debate goes into history, what are people going to remember? Probably the fly. But anyway, you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I appreciate all the live viewers who are joining me, and I'm going to start now with the 4 major debate clips, starting with the one from the very beginning. And I think if Kamala Harris won the debate, and like I said, I think it was a tie, inconsequential, they both did no harm, didn't really affect the way the race is going one way or the other, in my opinion. And you'll see some people say that when I get to the punditry at the end. But if Kamala Harris won the debate anywhere, it was right at the beginning. She started off strong. This is the part that probably had the most viewers, and she took on the Trump administration response on COVID-19, talked about that it was basically the biggest policy bungle of any president in American history, which is a good thing to say in your first sentence in the only debate you get to do, I guess. And I will watch that. This is about 5.5 minutes, the very beginning of the debate, where I think a lot of the trends for the debate were set. And you'll also see some "Thank you, Mr. Vice Presidents." That was, I've been thinking of making a video that is just like all the times, all the ends of Vice President Mike Pence's answers, where he kept going and going while the moderator, Susan Page, said, "Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Mr. Vice President." And that rule gets set in this first clip I will talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
The coronavirus is not under control. Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses and schools and hotspots? A federal mandate to wear masks? You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Thank you, Susan. Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment. And here's the thing. On January 28th, the vice president and the president were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it is airborne, that it will affect young people, and that it would be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening, and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. The president said it was a hoax. They minimized the seriousness of it. The president said, you're on one side of his ledger if you wear a mask, you're on the other side of his ledger if you don't. And in spite of all of that, today they still don't have a plan. They still don't have a plan. Well, Joe Biden does. And our plan is about what we need to do around a national strategy for contact tracing, for testing, for administration of the vaccine, and making sure that it will be free for all. That is the plan that Joe Biden has and that I have, knowing that we have to get a hold of what has been going on, and we need to save our country. And Joe Biden is the best leader to do that. And frankly, this administration has forfeited their right to re-election based on this.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, more than 210,000 Americans have died of COVID-19 since February. The U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population is higher than that of almost every other wealthy nation on earth. For instance, our death rate is 2.5 times that of Canada next door. You head the administration's coronavirus task force. Why is the U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population higher than that of almost every other wealthy country? And you have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Susan, thank you. And I want to thank the Commission and the University of Utah for hosting this event. And Senator Harris, it's a privilege to be on the stage with you. And our nation has gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China, President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done. And that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world. Now, Senator Joe Biden opposed that decision. He said it was xenophobic and hysterical. But I can tell you, having led the White House Coronavirus Task Force, that decision alone by President Trump bought us invaluable time to stand up the greatest national mobilization since World War II. And I believe it saved hundreds of thousands of American lives. Because with that time, we were able to reinvent testing. More than 115 million tests have been done to date. We were able to see to the delivery of billions of supplies so our doctors and nurses had the resources and support they needed. And we began, really, before the month of February was out, to develop a vaccine and to develop medicines and therapeutics that have been saving lives all along the way. And under President Trump's leadership, Operation Warp Speed, we believe we'll have literally tens of millions of doses of a vaccine before the end of this year. The reality is, when you look at the Biden plan, it reads an awful lot like what President Trump and I and our task force have been doing every step of the way. I mean, quite frankly, when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine, it looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about. And I think the American people know that this is a president who has put the health of America first, and the American people, I believe with my heart, can be proud of the sacrifices they have made. It's saved countless American lives.
Senator Harris, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked.
And I think Kamala Harris definitely won the initial interchange. I don't know if she won the debate. Like I said, I think it was more inconsequential. They both made their points. That it was a high level of talking points in the debate. By the way, I'm seeing some stream errors here, and I'm not sure if it looks like I'm having some streaming problems here, so I might have to upload the recorded version later, which is a little disappointing. Looks like, sorry about that. It looks like I was getting some stream errors. I don't know, for the live viewers, if you noticed that, it looked like my streaming cut off for a second. But I was about to say that first that I was watching the live comments along the way there, and I noticed that I got 2 more Super Chat contributions, both Shares Gallagher, the Black Flies Matter, 10 euros. Thank you for that Super Chat contribution. And then Lulu Girl with the, I don't know, is that a boxing kitten? I don't know. I'm not sure what that is, that GIF there, but I appreciate the Super Chat contributions along the way. And since there was that stream error there, I don't know, I'll have to see how it works out, but I might end up uploading the recorded show, especially if I keep having stream errors. I don't know why I have, like, my internet's not as good in the afternoon for these debate clip roundups as it is on Sunday evenings. I don't know what that's about, but anyway, I apologize for that. And I also saw this comment, the live comment along the way from Derek11. And you can see there, and I think for Derek11, I'm sorry if the stream is cutting out while I'm doing this again, but yeah, here's the... And I'm sorry for the recorded show viewers. I'm trying to make sure the live viewers get to see everything. And so that was the comment from Derek11 that Susan Page was terrible at moderating. And I think that may be true. That especially in terms of not having follow-up questions, she let both candidates, but especially Mike Pence, get away with not answering the questions. And you saw the, like, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. There was also a thank you, Senator Harris there, where Kamala Harris actually stopped her answer when she got that prompt from the moderator. But Vice President Pence was quite a rule breaker. I'm going to start this next clip. This is... you'll see it starts with, like, thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you, Vice President Pence, again. I talked earlier that maybe I should just make a video of all the ends of Pence's answers where Susan Page started saying, thank you, Vice President Pence, and string them all together. And I think there's like an extra 10 minutes or so of debate, although apparently they spoke about the same amount of time. So I don't know if that means that Susan Page compensated by asking an extra question to Kamala Harris or what that's all about. But anyway, this next clip starts with the thank you, Vice President Pence, and then shows him not answering the question about the Rose Garden super spreader event. Although Kamala Harris gets in some good points, but never answers Vice President Pence gets away with not answering the real question in this second debate clip I will talk about with you a little more after we watch together over here.
You mentioned earlier, Vice President Pence, that the president was committed to maintaining protections for people with pre-existing conditions. But you do have this court case that you are supporting, your administration supporting, that would strike down the Affordable Care Act. The president says, President Trump says that he's going to protect people with pre-existing conditions, but he has not explained how he would do that. And that was one of the toughest nuts to crack when they were passing the Affordable Care Act. So tell us specifically, how would your administration protect Americans with pre-existing conditions to have access to affordable insurance if the Affordable Care Act is struck down?
Well, thank you, Susan. But let me just say, addressing your very first question, I couldn't be more proud to serve as vice president to a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life. I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. And this is another one of those cases where there's such a dramatic contrast. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support taxpayer funding of abortion all the way up to the moment of birth, late-term abortion. They want to increase funding to Planned Parenthood of America. Now, for our part, I would never presume how Judge Amy Coney Barrett would rule on the Supreme Court of the United States, but we'll continue to stand strong for the right to life. When you speak about the Supreme Court, though, I think the American people really deserve an answer, Senator Harris. Are you and Joe Biden going to pack the court if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed? I mean, there have been 29 vacancies on the Supreme Court during presidential election years, from George Washington to Barack Obama. Presidents have nominated in all 29 cases.
It took me that long to realize that was the third clip. So anyone who, I know some people do a drinking game where they drink when I make mistakes. I played clip 3 instead of clip 2. I will get to that clip 3, but no, here is the thank you, Vice President Pence, going into the Rose Garden super spreader event question. I'll explain how Trump's Vice President Pence there in the third clip doesn't answer the pre-existing condition question and makes up his own question to ask Kamala Harris. You saw already happening in clip 3. Sorry about that, though. I wanted to play clip 2, which, like I said, is the thank you, Vice President Pence, beginning, going into the Rose Garden super spreader event question. He also doesn't answer over here.
Thank you.
They also said to us, if we did everything right, Susan, we could still lose more than 200,000 Americans.
Vice President
Now, one
Pence,
life lost is too many, Susan. But the American people, I believe, deserve credit for the sacrifices that they have made, putting the health of their family and their neighbors first, our doctors, our nurses, our first responders.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago at what seems to have been a super spreader event for senior administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
Well, the American people have demonstrated over the last 8 months that when given the facts, they're willing to put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first. And President Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic, when we were losing a heartbreaking number of 2,500 Americans a day, we surged resources to New Jersey and New York and New Orleans and Detroit. We told the American people what needed to be done, and the American people made the sacrifices. When the outbreak in the Sun Belt happened this summer, again, Americans stepped forward. But the reality is the work of the President of the United States goes on. A vacancy on the Supreme Court of the United States has come upon us, and the President introduced Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
If I may say, that Rose Garden event, there's been a great deal of speculation about it. My wife Karen and I were there and honored to be there. Many of the people who were at that event, Susan, actually were tested for coronavirus And it was an outdoor event, which all of our scientists regularly and routinely advise. The difference here is President Trump and I trust the American people to make choices in the best interest of their health. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care,
Thank you,
the Green
Vice
New
President
Deal, all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Let's talk about respecting the American people. You respect the American people when you tell them the truth. You respect the American people when you have the courage
Which we've
to be a
always
leader
done.
speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves. But this administration stood on information that if you had as a parent, if you had as a worker, knowing you didn't have enough money saved up, and now you're standing in a food line because of the ineptitude of an administration that was unwilling to speak the truth to the American people. So let's talk about caring about the American people. The American people have had to sacrifice far too much because of the incompetence of this administration. It is asking too much of the people.
Susan, we talked about
Vice
It is
President
asking
Pence.
too much of the people. That they would not be equipped with the information they need to help themselves to protect
Susan,
their parents
President-
and
No,
their
I'm
children.
sorry. Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, I'm sorry.
It's fine, I'm Kamala.
No, you're Senator Harris to me. For life to get back to normal, Dr. Anthony Fauci and other experts say that most of the people who can be vaccinated need to be vaccinated. But half of Americans now say they wouldn't take a vaccine if it was released now. If the Trump administration approves a vaccine before or after the election, should Americans take it, and would you take it?
If the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it, absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Vice President Pence, there have been a lot of repercussions from this pandemic. In recent days, the president's diagnosis of COVID-19 has underscored the importance of the job that you hold and that you are seeking. That's our second topic tonight. It's the role of the vice president. One of you will make history on January 20th. You will be the vice president to the oldest president the United States has ever had. Donald Trump will be 74 years old on Inauguration Day. Joe Biden will be 78 years old. That already has raised concerns among some voters, concerns that have been sharpened by President Trump's hospitalization in recent days. Vice President Pence, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan, thank you, although I would like to go back.
I think we need to move on
well,
to the
thank
issue
you,
of
but I would like to
vice
go back
presidency.
because the reality is that we're going to have a vaccine, Senator, in record time, in unheard of time, in less than a year. We have 5 companies in phase 3 clinical trials, and we're right now producing tens of millions of doses. So the fact that you continue to undermine public confidence in a vaccine, if the vaccine emerges during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives.
Stop playing politics. He said it. That's the thing about Pence. He's in some ways he's like so smooth. He's like he's using a lot of the same talking points as Donald Trump, our president, but he comes across as like, well, he used to be a radio talk show host. He doesn't answer questions. He gives the answer. He wants to give whatever the question was, and I mean, he sounds so sad that you're playing politics with people's lives. Like he isn't. For my Sunday live clip roundup viewers, you've seen me do my. I did a live stream several months back about necropolitics, about how the Trump administration has, and you can even see it now, the whole like herd mentality, which is herd immunity, where Trump has decided that his people aren't really going to die, and the people who are going to die aren't, worth saving. And I mean, talk about playing politics with people's lives. I am noticing that it looks like I'm getting stream errors again. Before, nobody said they got stream errors. Nobody's getting stream errors again. That would be nice. Otherwise, I'll have to re-upload this later. But you also saw there how Pence was a total rule breaker. He started off with the "Thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you, Vice President Pence." And then at the end, he skipped back to the previous topic when he was supposed to go on to the next topic. And I'm going to show you how Pence also got away with that in the clip that I played by mistake earlier. Or I started to play, but didn't play the whole thing. This is Vice President Pence getting asked about what is Trump's plan to protect people's pre-existing conditions since he's in court trying to get rid of Obamacare. Right before this next clip, Kamala Harris made a great comment where she looked into the camera and said, Trump's coming after you if you have a pre-existing condition. But then Pence is asked about that, never answers it, and switches it around, saying that Kamala Harris isn't answering about court packing. Court packing is also a derogatory term that I don't think really represents the type of court reform we need, but I will talk about all of that a little more. And I don't know if my live viewers are still there, or I'm seeing a thing saying I'm not streaming right now. I'll check what's going on with the live viewers as we watch the clip that I started to play by mistake and am now playing on purpose, where Pence avoids answering pre-existing condition about what is the Trump administration plan regarding pre-existing conditions, switches it around, and by the end it's a whole different topic that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
You mentioned earlier, Vice President Pence, that the president was committed to maintaining protections for people with pre-existing conditions. But you do have this court case that you are supporting, your administration supporting, that would strike down the Affordable Care Act. The President Trump says that he's going to protect people with pre-existing conditions, but he has not explained how he would do that. And that was one of the toughest nuts to crack when they were passing the Affordable Care Act. So tell us specifically, how would your administration protect Americans with pre-existing conditions to have access to affordable insurance if the Affordable Care Act is struck down?
Well, thank you, Susan. But let me just say, addressing your very first question, I couldn't be more proud to serve as vice president to a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life. I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. And this is another one of those cases where there's such a dramatic contrast. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support taxpayer funding of abortion all the way up to the moment of birth, late-term abortion. They want to increase funding to Planned Parenthood of America. Now, for our part, I would never presume how Judge Amy Coney Barrett would rule on the Supreme Court of the United States, but we'll continue to stand strong for the right to life. When you speak about the Supreme Court, though, I think the American people really deserve an answer, Senator Harris. Are you and Joe Biden going to pack the court if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed? I mean, there have been 29 vacancies on the Supreme Court during presidential election years, from George Washington to Barack Obama. Presidents have nominated in all 29 cases. But your party is actually openly advocating adding seats to the Supreme Court, which has had 9 seats for 150 years, if you don't get your way. This is a classic case of if you can't win by the rules, you're going to change the rules. Now, you've refused to answer the question. Joe Biden has refused to answer the question. So I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed at the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more. In 1864...
Well, I'd like you to answer the question.
No, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Okay. In 1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly of the president, I assume of you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln. Mm-hmm. Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election, and it was 27 days before the election, and a seat became open on the United States Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate. But Honest Abe said it's not the right thing to do. The American people deserve to make the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And then that person can select who will serve for a lifetime on the highest court of our land. And so Joe and I are very clear. The American people are voting right now, and it should be their decision about who will serve on this most important body for a lifetime.
Thank you,
And
Senator
the
Harris.
people, Susan, are voting right now. They'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court if you don't get your way in this nomination.
Let's talk about packing.
You once
Come
again
on.
gave a non-answer. Joe Biden gave a non-answer.
Trying to answer you
the
now.
American people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is they are going to pack the Supreme Court if they somehow win this election. Men and
Mr.
women,
Vice President,
I got to
I
tell you,
think
people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to reject the Biden-Harris ticket. Come November the 3rd, re-elect President Donald Trump, and we'll stand by that separation of powers in a 9-seat Supreme Court.
Yeah, let's talk about packing the court then. Let's talk about the
Please.
fact. Yeah, I'm about to. So the Trump-Pence administration has been, because I sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Susan, as you mentioned, and I've witnessed the appointments for lifetime appointments to the federal courts, district courts, courts of appeal. People who are purely ideological, people who have been reviewed by legal professional organizations and found to have been not competent, are substandard. And do you know that of the 50 people who President Trump appointed to the Court of Appeals for lifetime appointments, not one is black? This is what they've been doing. You want to talk about packing a court? Let's have that discussion.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Senator. Let's go on and talk about the issue of racial justice.
I just want the record to reflect she never answered the question. So maybe
you.
the next debate, Joe Biden will answer the question.
Thank you.
But I think
Thank
the
you.
American people know the answer.
Thank you, Vice President.
So yeah, that's pretty ballsy that when the question there was, what is the Trump administration plan on pre-existing conditions, that by the end of that clip, Mike Pence was saying, she never answered the question about court packing. And court packing, by the way, is a derogatory term from the FDR time. And I'm not sure that adding justices would be court packing. I would like to refer to it as court reform. And I think Kamala Harris made some progress there in making the point that what Trump and especially Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell have been doing, that's the real court packing. They left open all these federal judgeships at the end of the Obama term, not to mention Merrick Garland never getting a hearing or a vote. And then they, with 100 open, judicial vacancies, then they put in all these often unqualified judges, people who have less qualification, people who, I did many jury trials. These are people who never did a trial, never even people who have no experience in our court system becoming judges. I mean, in a way, it makes me think, maybe when Biden gets into office, I could become a judge because I have more qualifications than a lot of the Trump judges. But they held open all these judicial vacancies, and then they put in, not just at the Supreme Court level, where they stole the Merrick Garland seat and then totally reversed themselves hypocritically with what they're doing now with Amy Coney Barrett, because they said they couldn't give Merrick Garland even a hearing or a vote, but because it was an election year and now so much closer to the election, like Kamala Harris said, they're trying to ram through this justice. And then Brett Kavanaugh in the middle, who I've talked about over and over again since I was in his freshman class and lived in the same freshman dorm building that he lived in at Yale, that I know that he lied about his drinking activity at Yale. Debbie Ramirez, who I went to college with, made some allegations about being sexually assaulted at a party. A bunch of other people were there. They never got interviewed by the FBI. Brett Kavanaugh's freshman roommate never got interviewed by the FBI, James Roche. There were multiple, like there were 25, 30 people who lived in Lawrence Hall at Yale in 1983-84. In addition to Deborah Ramirez, Deborah Ramirez was actually interviewed by the FBI, but James Roche, Brett Kavanaugh's freshman roommate, never interviewed by the FBI, and 7 background checks. Anyway, I could talk about that for like a whole other hour. I didn't mean to get off on that tangent, but I'm just saying that Merrick Garland's seat stolen should have been Obama's. Amy Coney Barrett being rushed through while people are already voting, and then Brett Kavanaugh in the middle. The White House stopped the FBI investigation of really credible allegations he lied to the Senate about his drinking behavior at Yale, not to mention various other things. FBI wasn't allowed to investigate. That's 3 seats stolen in various ways by the Trump administration, in my opinion. So I believe extra seats should be added to the court. I would actually like Biden and Harris to answer the question about court packing or court reform or fixing what was stolen. I would call it I originally was going to call it the Merrick Garland, Brett Kavanaugh turn the court up to 11 act that went from 9 to 11 seats. But now that they have a 3rd seat, I don't know if they're going to get Amy Coney Barrett on the court. But if they do, then I think that 11 might not be enough seats. They might have to go up to 15 or whatever. But I think it's... And that means they would also have to get rid of the filibuster. We'd have to have Biden as president. The Democrats take the Senate. They'd have to get rid of the filibuster and pass this court reform, not court packing. That's a lot of ifs, but I think they have more authority to do it if they say that they are going to do it before the election. Then they would have a mandate to do it. On the other hand, I think the calculation that the Biden campaign has made is that they're more likely to win the presidency and the Senate if they don't talk about it, which I guess that's a political calculation that makes sense, but I don't know. I say go for transparency and openness and create a mandate. That's my opinion. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I'm sorry I went off on that whole Supreme Court tangent, but I do have one more long debate clip. This is the debate clip where the fly actually lands on Mike Pence's head. This is the one about racial justice. And you'll see in the first clip I show of the post-debate punditry, you'll see Gayle King make a joke about what the fly is saying when Mike Pence is talking about systemic racism in this clip. This starts off with a question about Breonna Taylor. You'll see that Kamala Harris brings up Charlottesville and Trump saying that there were fine people on both sides, and Pence brings up the whole fine people hoax talking points that are so prevalent on the right wing. I especially seen Dilbert cartoonist Scott Adams is a big proponent of the fine people hoax theory, which I disagree with. Maybe I'll talk about that if I think about it, or I'll see what's going on in the comment section. Oh, it looks like my stream health is better, at least. I don't know how much of it you all missed, but I'm going to show you this final clip about systemic racism, about Breonna Taylor, about Charlottesville, about how Kamala Harris brings up Trump telling the Proud Boys to, instead of stand down, to stand back and stand by. And anyway, like I said, this is the final debate clip. I will talk about with you a little more. Well, the final big debate clip. Then I have a brief 15-second clip from the beginning of the debate that I have saved for reasons I will discuss after we watch this clip together over here.
In the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Well, our heart breaks for the loss of any innocent American life. And the family of Breonna Taylor has our sympathies. But I trust our justice system, a grand jury that refused the evidence. And it really is remarkable that as a former prosecutor, you would assume that an impaneled grand jury looking at all the evidence got it wrong. But you're entitled to your opinion, Senator. I think, look, and with regard to George Floyd, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. And justice will be served. But there's also no excuse for the rioting and looting that followed. I mean, it really is astonishing. Flora Westbrook is with us here tonight in Salt Lake City. Just a few weeks ago, I stood at what used to be her salon. It was burned to the ground by rioters and looters. And Flora is still trying to put her life back together. And I must tell you, this presumption that you hear consistently from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that America is systemically racist, and that, as Joe Biden said, that he believes that law enforcement has an implicit bias against minorities, is a great insult to the men and women who serve in law enforcement. And I want everyone to know who puts on the uniform of law enforcement every day that President Trump and I stand with you. And it is remarkable that when Senator Tim Scott tried to pass a police reform bill, brought together a group of Republicans and Democrats, Senator Harris, you got up and walked out of the room. And then you filibustered Senator Tim Scott's bill on the Senate floor that would have provided new accountability, new resources. Look, we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement, improving public safety, and supporting our African-American neighbors and all of our minorities. Under President Trump's leadership, we'll always stand with law enforcement, and we'll do what we've done from day one, and that is improve the lives of African Americans.
Thank you, Vice President.
Record unemployment, record investments in education, and we'll fight for school choice for all of our minorities.
Thank you, Vice President.
I'd like to respond.
Senator Harris.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President on what it means to enforce the laws of our country. I am the only one on this stage who has personally prosecuted everything from child sexual assault to homicide. I'm the only one on this stage who has prosecuted the big banks for taking advantage of America's homeowners. I'm the only one on this stage who prosecuted for-profit colleges for taking advantage of our veterans. And the reality of this is that we are talking about an election in 27 days, where last week the President of the United States took a debate stage in front of 70 million Americans and refused to condemn white supremacists.
Not true.
And
not true.
It wasn't like he didn't have a chance. He didn't do it, and then he doubled down. And then he said, when pressed, stand back, stand by. And this is a part of a pattern of Donald Trump's. He called Mexicans rapists and criminals. He instituted as his first act a Muslim ban. On the issue of Charlottesville, where people were peacefully protesting the need for racial justice, where a young woman was killed. And on the other side, there were neo-Nazis carrying tiki torches, shouting racial epithets, anti-Semitic slurs. And Donald Trump, when asked about it, said there were fine people on both sides. This is who we have as the President of the United States. And America, you deserve better. Joe Biden will be a president who brings our country together.
Senator Harris.
And recognizes the beauty in our diversity and the fact that we all have so much more in common than what separates us.
Vice President Pence, let me give you a minute to respond.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that very much. You know, I think this is one of the things that makes people dislike the media so much in this country, Susan, is that you selectively edit, just like Senator Harris did, comments that President Trump and I and others on our side of the aisle make. I mean, Senator Harris conveniently omitted, after the president made comments about people on either side of the debate over monuments, he condemned the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists, and has done so repeatedly. You're concerned that he doesn't condemn neo-Nazis. President Trump has Jewish grandchildren. His daughter and son-in-law are Jewish. This is a president who respects and cherishes all of the American people. But you talk about having personally prosecuted. I'm glad you brought up your record, Senator.
Thank you.
But I really need to make this point. When you were DA in San Francisco, when you left office, African Americans were 19 times more likely to be prosecuted for minor drug offenses than whites and Hispanics. When you were Attorney General of California, you increased the disproportionate incarceration of blacks in California. Yeah. You did nothing on criminal justice reform in California. You didn't lift a finger to pass the First Step Act on Capitol Hill. I mean, the reality is your record speaks for itself. President Trump and I have fought for criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Vice President
We've fought
Pence.
for educational choice and opportunities for African Americans, all of our
Thank you, sir.
And we'll do it for 4 more
Thank
years.
you. You know, there is no more.
And that was my last real debate clip there with a lot more thank you, Vice President Pence's, which that was something I heard from Susan Page over and over. I heard a couple thank you, Senator Harris's, or there was one Kamala in there in the first clip I showed, or was that the second clip, or the third clip after I showed the third clip by mistake and showed the second clip as the third clip, or anyway, you saw the fly there, you saw the fly land on the head, and I'm going to show you Gayle King's joke about the fly landing on the head as the clip after next. But one thing I wanted to point out that wasn't mentioned after the debate, I'm going to show you all the big five corporate outlets now responding to the end of the debate. ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News. Did I get all five there? The so-called corporate media, as I always say. And you'll see they all have a shot of the spouses. It's Karen Pence, Mike Pence's wife, and then Doug Emhoff, I think, is Kamala Harris's husband. They both come onto the stage, and you'll see Doug Emhoff wearing a mask. Karen Pence not wearing a mask. And why is this an important thing that I'm pointing out, and none of the corporate outlets are going to point out in any of the coverage I'm going to show you, even though they show the distinction, every single one of them? Well, here's what Susan Page said at the beginning of the debate about what they're doing at the location because of COVID.
In Kingsbury Hall tonight, we have a small and socially distant audience, and we've taken extra precautions during this pandemic. Among other things, everyone in the audience is required to wear a face mask, and the candidates will be seated 12 feet apart.
So everyone was supposed to wear a face mask. And it's so, you would think after what happened at the first presidential debate where the first family, all of, Trump, Melania and all the Trump kids and Jared and all their assorted consorts or whatever, that they came in and took their masks off, and then someone from the Cleveland Clinic even offered them masks and they were waved away. They refused to wear masks. And that was incredibly dangerous now that we know what happened. And you would think after that Karen Pence would be wearing her damn mask. But no, I guess the rules don't apply to them, or I don't know, maybe she doesn't need a mask because God is protecting. Well, I don't know. You can give me your theories down in the comment section, but I wanted to point that out because I'm going to show you, like I said, all five of the big five corporate outlets covering the end of the debate, and they all start with what I was just talking about. Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's husband, coming on stage with a mask. Karen Pence, no mask. And then this clip goes through, like I said, Gayle King's fly joke that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch the CBS News post-debate coverage together over here.
And that concludes the first and only vice presidential debate from Utah, in which We know that the plexiglass in between them did not stop the interruptions of either the moderator or the candidates. Kamala Harris coming out strong in the beginning, noting that the way the administration had handled the COVID crisis was the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And then Mike Pence coming back tough as well, essentially accusing the Biden's plan of being exactly the same as what the administration has already done. Joining me here, John Dickerson, Gayle King. I want to get each of your take, John.
Well, I think if you look at the global situation, the Trump-Pence campaign is in a difficult spot. The polls are going in the wrong direction. Joe Biden is competing in states where Donald Trump should have it locked up. Donald Trump is personally sick and had a bad first debate. So in that environment, Mike Pence did well. His boss will be happy. You mentioned the interruptions. They were mostly on the Pence side, almost entirely on the Pence side, but he did a kind of slow jazz version of interruption as opposed to Donald Trump's version. Yeah. And he didn't answer, as they'll teach you in debate school, you answer the question you want to, not the one that's asked. The question is whether his performance keeping the issue on the economy, attacking Joe Biden, all of which may have scored him points in the nanosecond. The Biden campaign had a helper on the stage, two pieces of plexiglass, which are there because of the ongoing pandemic. And that is the bigger story that exists outside of this debate stage tonight. And so that is something we need to keep in mind when we think about the debate and the larger story going on.
I think many people are wondering why Mike Pence was even on the stage. If you listen to the CDC rules, you're not even supposed to be in contact with other people when you've been exposed to someone who has coronavirus, which we know the president does. But I thought Susan Page set the tone very early when she said, listen, the American people deserve to have a conversation. They deserve to have a civilized conversation, which I think for the most part we did. But a couple of times, many times, I kept thinking, I wish there were thought bubbles so we could see what they were each thinking, because many times, more on Mike Pence's side, I have to say, where he didn't answer the question, he would pivot to something else. There was at one point where Kamala, when he was asked a question directly about social distancing, and at the White House Rose Garden, and you could see Kamala's face like, yeah, now what are you going to say? At one point when they were talking about systemic racism, I think it's very interesting timing that a fly would land on Mike Pence's head at that particular time when he said that there really wasn't systemic racism. I saw the fly basically go and say, what? I mean, it was very interesting. That was, I don't want to call that a highlight, but that was certainly a memorable moment.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think that might, as this vice presidential debate goes into history, if there's anything memorable about it, the fly may actually be I don't know if it's a highlight, but the most memorable moment of the debate. And apparently, according to Gayle King, the fly was on Mike Pence's head, hearing him say there was no systemic racism and responding by saying, say what? Say what? I don't know. That was maybe, I don't know, is that the most humorous of the responses I'm going to show you? Well, I'm going to show you 4 more corporate media responses, and I think what the pundits said there kind of backed up some of the political commentary I gave earlier on the clips. The CNN response is so long, I'm going to split it into 2 clips where they do get to the fly eventually. The first is Wolf Blitzer and then Jake Tapper. I kind of split it that way because later I have the MSNBC response split into 2 clips where I have like the men at the beginning and then the women at the end. I don't know why it works out that way. Maybe well, you'll see in the second clip it's Jake Tapper who brings up the issue of gender. But anyway, I don't want to too much pre-criticize the clip, so I will talk about this first CNN response, just like the CBS response. Nobody mentions Karen Pence, no mask, Doug Emhoff, mask, following the rules, which I will talk about with you a little more, or I will talk about this clip with you a little more after we watch the first of 2 parts of the CNN Jake Tapper, Wolf Blitzer response. Wait. Right, this is the first 2 minutes of the CNN response to the debate over here.
Well, there you have it. 2 candidates largely refraining from the fireworks. Certainly a contrast to President Trump's performance last week in that first presidential debate. Tonight, it was much more civil. Both candidates clearly did their best to dodge important, serious, tough questions from Susan Page, questions that they didn't want to answer. She asked a very good question, Susan Page, I must point out. And Mike Pence, in the process, also learned that it's nearly impossible to put a positive spin on the administration's record when it comes to coronavirus, with more than 210,000 Americans dead. She scored some points when she said these words: the greatest failure of a presidential administration in the history of our country. The candidates, their spouses, they're on the stage right there. We'll continue to watch. In the meantime, let's check in with Jake.
Thanks, Wolf. Well, I have to say, I think it was, first of all, a normal debate, regular debate, not an emotionally abusive session with somebody who's a little unhinged. Both candidates got in some punches. I thought Senator Harris was effective when going after the administration's record when it came to COVID. Obviously, I thought Vice President Pence going after Biden's record and attacking Harris as on the fringes of her party, which, as we expected, I think there will be a lot that Republicans will be happy to talk about when it comes to his performance. It was more standard. There is, I think, a disparity in terms of some of the unanswered questions. Both of them did a lot of dodging. Harris wouldn't answer the question about the court packing, and that's significant, and Biden and Harris should answer it. But on the other hand, Pence wouldn't answer the question about why the U.S. death rate from COVID is so much worse than any other wealthy country, and he wouldn't commit to a peaceful transfer of power. So while they both dodged questions, I can't help but think these ones that...
So, yeah, there, Jake Tapper, I think, pointed out a couple. Well, first, I didn't even show you the clip where Mike Pence wouldn't commit to a peaceful transfer of power. Well, he kind of dodged the question, and he talked about all the ways that Biden isn't necessarily willing to concede, and he sort of dodged that question. And Jake Tapper also pointed out how Mike Pence couldn't explain why the United States has like 4% of the U.S. Of the world population, but 20+% of the deaths. He dodged that question. I mean, the rest of that, in terms of, there was some good stuff in there, but I wanted to go on to Dana Bash pointing out the pre-existing condition dodge, which was really important. Oh, and do you see how Jake Tapper said that Kamala Harris dodged the question on packing the Supreme Court, which, like I said, packing the Supreme Court is a derogatory term. It's more like Supreme Court reform after the Republicans stole not only Supreme Court seats, but packed the whole federal judiciary by not filling seats at the end of Obama's term and then ramming through a whole bunch of unqualified justices or judges, which I talked about earlier. I don't want to go off on the whole Brett Kavanaugh tangent again, which I'm willing to talk about at the drop of a hat any moment, because I'm outraged that Brett Kavanaugh made it onto the court after lying to the committee that was supposed to get to the bottom of his prior behavior and his judicial temperament. And now I am going off on a tangent, but I think you have to get to this next clip here. Finally, like after about that was almost 2 minutes. This is a little over 6 minutes from CNN, where they finally get to the topic that I have highlighted, the fly. But here you'll also see Dana Bash start off pointing out, in addition to all the things Jake Tapper talked about, Mike Pence not answering, he also didn't answer the pre-existing condition question. That was actually when he changed the subject to court packing. And anyway, I will talk about all of that a little more after we watch the rest of the CNN post-debate analysis, adding in Dana Bash and another commentator I will talk about with you a little more after we watch together over here.
And I can add another one to that that's very significant. He wouldn't answer how a second term of the Trump administration would preserve pre-existing condition promises that is under Obamacare, which they're trying to do away with in the court. I agree with you. Our hearts are racing a little bit less right now than they were last week. This was much more civilized, but it was really stunning to see the way Mike Pence pivoted almost at every question, not answering the question and not going back to actually follow up on the question. Kamala Harris was more respectful of the questions and tried to answer the questions. I'm not sure if that got her anywhere. I do think at the end of the day, Mike Pence did what he needed to do, maybe and then some, and same with Senator Harris.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we, as we all have covered Mike Pence, we know that this is his superpower as an interviewee. He often just completely disregards the question and answers the way that he thinks is best. But in the context of this debate, it really did create this imbalance between the two of them. And I do think that Harris missed some opportunities here to push back at opportunities when Pence took them, even when it wasn't his turn. And then he was given time to go over by 30 seconds here, 45 seconds there. I mean, these are technicalities, but in the moment, what it means is that you felt like you got more talking time from Pence.
And as interviewers, all three of us, it was definitely frustrating to hear the question and then not hear a follow-up when both of them, but much more, Mike Pence didn't answer the question at all. Went completely in a different direction.
So something also that I think we can't ignore is the concept of gender. And we're so used to seeing white men, but definitely men, on the stage when it comes to being on a ticket. Senator Harris is only the third woman to be on a ticket. The first one was in 1984 with Geraldine Ferraro. Then we had to wait till, I'm sorry, she's the fourth. And then 2008, Sarah Palin, 2016, Hillary Clinton. And I wonder if a woman candidate feels like she can't push as much or steamroll as much as, say, Mike Pence can, for fear of seeming and offending some segment of the electorate. I'm not saying it should be that way, but I'm wondering if it is that way.
Well, I'll tell you this, and Abby, I want to get your thoughts on this. I was texting with a friend who is an African-American man saying, do you think that she's kind of letting some things go in a way that maybe she shouldn't? And the answer was, are you kidding me? You know that she's a black woman. She has to kind of pull her punches on that. And I'm not sure if that's true. I mean, she was tough, and she certainly had her moments. But there were times when maybe there could have been more follow-up. And I don't know if that's something that was going through her head or not. I hope it wasn't.
You know, this is something that I'm sure, you know, for every woman in politics, and particularly black women, there is this line that you have to thread. You know, I was also texting with people close to her, you know, who looked at this and kind of felt like Pence was taking advantage of the rules, of the fact that he was able to just flout them. And perhaps she should have pushed back in certain ways. I think that's where debate prep comes in. There are ways to do it in ways that don't sort of present in a certain way. But this is a line that only women really have to thread.
And in fairness to her, she didn't get a lot of help from the moderator.
She did not.
You know, Susan Page, you know, she was very by the book. She followed the rules, followed the time.
There was a moment where Pence literally said, I've got to finish this point. And then he was allowed to finish his point well beyond his time. I think people saw that back home, and I think there was clearly an imbalance there.
She was very effective, I thought, at the beginning of the debate when she was just addressing the facts of the coronavirus response and the inadequacy of the administration's response. The very fact that they have to be in a theater with people in the audience wearing masks, separated, plexiglass there. These are just the facts. And she really went after the Pence administration's response. She didn't invoke the fact that the White House is currently a hot zone.
I thought that was one of the most interesting things about the COVID section. The sort of hypocrisy of the Trump administration was right there for Kamala Harris to take advantage of. And she didn't, but she chose to do something else, pivoting it back to everyday Americans and their personal experiences with the virus. But when Mike Pence ignored the question about why Americans should follow the CDC rules when the Trump administration flouted them in the Rose Garden, it felt like there was not any adequate response to sort of illustrate what was going on there. And so I see what she was trying to do, talking directly to the American people. Time we are living through a White House coronavirus hotspot, and it really didn't get brought up.
Absolutely. She was preparing, and we all spoke to sources around her to do exactly what she did, which does make sense, to make a connection. Every single person in this country has a connection in some shape or form to coronavirus. But you gave one example. Another example was when Susan Page asked the vice president about whether or not it is our right as American citizens to know about the health of the president. And he completely ignored. I mean, he didn't even come close to answering the question. And nobody held him accountable. Nobody held his feet to the fire. Those are really important questions that we don't really get a chance to ask the vice president, much less the person who wants his job.
Yeah, I mean, there were times during the debate that I thought that the most effective being on that stage to go after Vice President Pence was that fly that landed on his head. And,
arguably one of the most interesting things to happen
sat there for 10 minutes. Anderson?
Jake, thanks very much. The fly certainly got a lot of attention online.
And there, finally, like over 8 minutes in, CNN finally mentions the fly. Like, as I said, probably the most memorable historical moment, but not, of course, the most substantive moment. But you saw there, Jake Tapper finally brought up the fly. And one of the things I found most humorous about that clip is it's like Jake Tapper, the guy there who brings up the topic of gender, maybe Kamala Harris couldn't be too aggressive because she was worried about being, look like an annoying woman or an angry woman, and then it's Dana Bash who brings up the angry black woman thing, and then the third commentator, Abby Phillip, the black woman, actually talks about non-identity politics issues mostly, but does respond to what Dana Bash's point. But it was Jake Tapper brought up gender, and then Dana Bash, the white woman, brought up the black issue. So what does that say about CNN? You can let me know what you think down in the comments section. The next clip I'm going to show you is the Fox News response to the debate. It also, like I said, starts at the beginning, and like all the corporate news outlets, no mention of Karen Pence, no mask. Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's husband, is wearing a mask. That doesn't come up. Here you'll see that they are definitely biased in the Mike Pence direction. And there's even, I think, Martha McCallum at one point. It's Brett Baer and Martha McCallum at the beginning. And Martha McCallum says that, it took a while for the debate to warm up, but then Mike Pence started doing really well. But that's because in the first 10 or 15 minutes, that's where Kamala Harris probably won the debate on the whole COVID-19 issue. And that is pretty much proven from the first two clips I showed you. And so I thought that was kind of biased. And then the most amusing bias in this Fox News clip here is they do mention by the end of this clip that there is a fly that landed on somebody's head, but they never say whose head it was. They don't say it was on. If a fly if a fly landed on Joe Biden's head, they'd be talking about like how he was a corpse, how it was like a harbinger of death, and I guess the Bible, the biblical interpretation of flies is like Beelzebub and Satan. I'm sure that would be all over Fox News if a fly ever landed on Joe Biden's head for 3 minutes during a debate. But on Fox News, they don't even tell you whose head the fly landed on. This is about a little over 5.5 minutes. The Fox News reaction at the end of the debate over here.
The first and only vice presidential debate of 2020 comes to an end as the spouses of the two candidates come on stage. Vice President Pence, Senator Harris, both making points. But you can see why the Democrats, Martha, were building up Mike Pence as a debater this week. It was disciplined. It was sharp. It's the best I've seen him. And he hit his marks. Senator Harris obviously had some key points in the talk about COVID-19 and also about fighting for justice. But it seemed many times that Vice President Pence controlled the conversation in a disciplined kind of way, a much different debate, obviously, than the first presidential debate in tone and tenor and how it was run and how it was completed.
Yeah, I would say that it started out a little bit tentative, but it built in a very strong way for the vice president. If his job that he was set out to do was to hit his markers and to fix some of what wasn't laid down in terms of the Trump policy and the successes as they see it of the Trump presidency, I think that the folks in the Trump camp are going to feel really good tonight. I would guess that the president is very happy with how his vice president did. And with regard to Kamala Harris, she was forceful. She did a lot of she made a lot of faces at Mike Pence as he was making his way through some of his arguments against her. But she did her best to put her best foot forward in this debate tonight. But I think it was a very strong night for Mike Pence.
You know, how those smirks and nods and eye rolls and laughs play on the split screen is another part of a debate. You don't see that here in the hall unless you're looking at a TV. But it is part of debating on this national stage. And how that plays with the American people is a big question. The other big question is, does it make a huge difference in this race? I think that most people would say that Mike Pence had a very good night tonight, but does it change the dynamic? Let's bring in our all-star panel. Chris Wallace, Britt Hume, Dana Perino, Juan Williams, Donna Brazil, and Karl Rove. Britt, I want to start with you, get your thoughts on this debate.
Well, I had a couple of thoughts. I agree with what you and Martha have been saying about the strength of Mike Pence's performance. It's worth noting, perhaps, that part of the reason why he was strong was that he kept ignoring the moderator's appeals to him to limit his time. I remember back in the days when I was involved in some of these debates, I always wanted there to be a bell or something on the stage that would go off when a candidate was over his time, because it got the moderator out of the business of having to be the time police, which I think audiences probably find annoying, although what choice does a moderator have? It occurred to me watching this debate that maybe the idea that most moderators have about having a list of questions and everything broken down into segments and so forth doesn't work very well. That maybe the better way to do it is to let them have at it and simply try to give each side equal time and let them fight over the issues they want to fight about. So those are just a couple of random thoughts about a debate that I don't think is going to change the trajectory of this election. But it was certainly more issue-oriented and more informative than the prior one, where the candidates kind of ruined it for everybody.
Chris Wallace, there were a few points there where Kamala Harris kind of dodged some of the questions that were still lingering from the last debate, the question of packing the court. She also did not directly answer what, if any, restrictions she would place on abortion in California if Roe v. Wade was overturned. Just a couple of the times that I think some of those things landed without a finish. Your thoughts as you look back at tonight?
Oh, I think they both ducked a lot of questions, Martha. While she ducked the question about what the restrictions or lack of restrictions would be in California, Mike Pence did exactly the same on restrictions in Indiana. I thought that her worst refusal to answer was exactly as you say on the packing of the court. But I thought that Pence had an equally egregious refusal to answer when he was asked, what would you do about protecting people with pre-existing conditions? And he absolutely refused to even discuss the issue. I thought both of them had a pretty good night. I thought that Kamala Harris's best point was when she was going after President Trump and Mike Pence on health care and the effort to overturn Obamacare in the Supreme Court the week after the election. She said, if you have pre-existing conditions, they're coming after you. If you're one of the 20 million people on Obamacare, they're coming after you. If you're one of the people who's 26 or under, who's on your family's plan. I thought, on the other hand, that Pence was most effective when he went at Kamala Harris on the question of a left-wing agenda, that she and Biden would raise taxes as soon as they came in, and also that they would push their environmental, what he said, radical environmental agenda at the expense of American workers. I thought it was actually a pretty even night. I agree with Britt. I don't think it's going to change the narrative very much. I do want to say, though, it is the first debate I've ever seen where there was a bug crawling around on one candidate's head for about 2 or 3 minutes, and I don't think we can let this evening go without mentioning that.
Well, that's right. It was part of the visuals.
Yeah, the bug was definitely part of the visuals, and Chris Wallace is like on this campaign since he moderated the last debate to like separate himself from Trump and try to show himself to be a journalist, I guess. I agree with pretty much everything Chris Wallace said there, though some of the other stuff was kind of ridiculous, and the end there where Chris Wallace finally mentioned the fly but didn't say whose head it was on, that was pretty much unforgivable. And they said it was all part of the optics or the visuals. That's what Bret Baier said. And they also didn't mention the pink eye, which I will get to in a little bit. And also Mike Pence's health. He did seem a little bit low energy. He is always kind of low energy. He's not the most charismatic guy. He's definitely kind of smooth. He knows how to get to what he wants to say instead of what the question is actually asking him, as I mentioned earlier. But I want to juxtapose that Fox News analysis with the analysis from MSNBC. I said NBC earlier. I don't know. I didn't actually record what was on the NBC channel. I just recorded MSNBC. And by the way, down in the video description, there's a link to both the entire debate on the Fox News website and also on the MSNBC website. For some reason, the Fox News debate is still available to watch on my phone, but if I try to watch it on my laptop, it says not available on this device. So you can click on that link and see if you can watch it on your device. But anyway, if you want to watch the whole debate, Chris Wallace did mention, like when Kamala Harris looked into the camera and said they're coming for your health care. I don't think that was in any of the clips that I showed you, but there are some like important moments, if this debate is important at all, and kind of my premise is it's not that important, but to the extent it's important, if you want to watch the whole debate, I put links down in the video description to watch the whole debate. But I'm gonna finish up with my last two corporate news outlet commentaries, but MSNBC then ABC, when they talk both about the fly on Pence's head and Pence's health. And I saw some people talking about the pink eye thing, and people couldn't see Pence's pink eye. Well, when I get to the last news clip, the ABC clip, they like zoom in on the pink eye. You can't miss the pink eye. But before I get to the ABC pink eye clip, where ABC never even mentions the fly, you'll see Brian Williams at the beginning of the post-debate commentary immediately mentions the fly. And so I just have the Brian Williams clip. I'm not really a big fan of Brian Williams. And he does mention the fly immediately, does not mention Karen Pence, no mask, Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's husband, wearing a mask. Why didn't any of the corporate outlets mention that? I don't know. And then I'll get to the second MSNBC clip where the women, it gets to the women and the fly, and by the end you'll see a Republican commentator who now works on MSNBC, Nicole Wallace. Actually, I'm not making this up. She's going to call Mike Pence flaccid. Flaccid. That seems... is that MSNBC bias? Calling a man flaccid on national TV? Well, you can let me know at... Well, that's going to be the second clip. We have to start with the Brian Williams part. Here's Brian Williams for 2 minutes giving his post-debate analysis I don't really care about, except he mentions the fly over here.
Brian Williams here with you following the first and only vice presidential debate of this cycle. This will be an interesting turn of events to watch as both candidates are joined on stage by their spouses, both of them flanking moderator Susan Page. Kamala Harris set the tone early on within her first sentence about the administration's coronavirus response. She called it the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And indeed, Mike Pence had a tough job with a losing argument. We say that because of a death toll that has tonight climbed north of 210,000 of our federal citizens. Mike Pence said tonight from that stage, Donald Trump has put the health of Americans first. Death toll numbers notwithstanding. He accused Democrats of playing politics with people's lives. Again, the death toll numbers notwithstanding. Social media held its own viewing party, as often happens. And on social media tonight, the talk was about an eye bleed that Mike Pence is apparently nursing and the fly that hung out on the vice president for a good long time. A headline just issued by the New York Post about that. Indeed, the Republican Bill Kristol has awarded second place after Kamala Harris to the fly in this debate, but that verges on the silly. As a viewing event, a whole lot of people complaining about Mike Pence's inability or lack of desire to take a rap, take a cue, as we say in the television business, and finish up his answers. A time disparity noted by so many of the people watching. We will check the math. But I digress. To our friends, Rachel Maddow, Nicole Wallace, Joy Reid, watching along with us. Take it away.
And I will have the three women, Joy Reid, Rachel Maddow, and Nicole Wallace, in the next clip there. But Brian Williams, he mentioned the eye bleed, he mentioned the fly, and he mentioned pretty close to what I would analyze the debate that Kamala Harris won near the beginning, that Mike Pence dodged a lot of questions, that anyway, you've been watching this video so far, so you know my analysis, and even so, I'm still not a great fan of Brian Williams, but at least he did mention the optics that, like I said, may end up being the most memorable parts of the debate, both the fly on Mike Pence's head and the eye bleed, the conjunctivitis, pink eye, whatever you want to call it. That actually leads into Nicole Wallace at the end of this clip. As I said before, by the end of this clip, you're going to have Rachel Maddow, you're going to have Joy Reid, and then Nicole Wallace. All three women analyzing that debate, saying that Mike Pence did not do a good job in terms of women, although I've seen some analyses, a couple of the corporate news outlets have measured how much time Kamala Harris spoke and how much time Mike Pence spoke, and they're pretty close. And I don't know if Susan Page asked an extra question to Kamala Harris, or I haven't measured it myself, but apparently they actually did kind of get equal speaking time. So that's one thing Brian Williams was not right about, in addition to many other things that he's done in the past, being under fire in a military zone and whatever. That's how he got demoted to MSNBC. Like I said earlier, I didn't really check to see if the NBC broadcast channel had different coverage of the debate, but I hope not. I hope everybody got to see Rachel Maddow and Joy Reid and Nicole Wallace doing the analysis here that talks about the fly, talks about mansplaining to black women, talks about whether Mike Pence might have some health problem he's not revealing. I don't know if that's true, but I will talk about that a little more after we watch this second final MSNBC clip together over here.
You know, I will say that what Brian was just saying about the fly, about the fly and the eye bleed thing, they were visually distracting and strange things. I don't think we need to dwell on them. Everybody knows what they were, but those were the oddities of this debate. Two weird things. One thing, something going on with Mike Pence's eye and that fly that nested in his hair quite comfortably for the length of an entire question. Other than that, it was like a visit to normal politics land, which is fine and to be expected when it comes to Senator Harris, who has been a mainstream Democratic politician essentially her whole life, even though she's had an interesting sort of rise to the place that she's in right now in the party. But Mike Pence was visiting from another world in which the Donald Trump presidency is a normal Republican presidency, and he was defending it on normal Republican terms, which sort of, I think, would have made for potentially a consequential debate if Pence was describing a presidency that existed. Maybe that's the way it exists in his own mind, but it's not the presidency that we've all lived through. And so he was defending something that's nothing like what we've lived through.
Yeah.
And trying to talk Senator Harris into the idea that she's the one who would represent a significant departure from the norms of American civility and moderation that he and Donald Trump represent.
Yeah.
So it's just, I mean, I don't think this debate is going to move the needle either way. I don't think either candidate surprised. The surprise was in the distance, I think, between what Vice President Pence was defending and what we've all seen from the presidency he serves.
Well, and I think if it does anything, apart from the fly being hilarious, and there'll probably be lots of memes about it tomorrow, I think the one thing that it could do is cement Donald Trump's biggest problem. His biggest problem is with women, with suburban women. Mm-hmm. And every woman who's ever been repeatedly interrupted in a meeting, who's ever not been allowed to finish a sentence, who's had a man refuse to follow the rules and just blow past whatever the norms and the sort of guardrails are supposed to be, when then you attempt to do the same, are mowed down. Just watch Mike Pence do a softer version of what Donald Trump did last week. He repeatedly interrupted her. He demanded, well, he also repeatedly interrupted the other woman in the room, which is the moderator, who seemed to at some point lose control of him. And he also continually demanded that Kamala Harris answer his questions. She wasn't there to answer his questions. She was not there to do whatever it is that Mike Pence told her to do. She was there to talk to the American people and answer Susan Page's questions. And she continually would look at him when he would do that and say, I'm talking. Mm-hmm. And she would give, I'm speaking, and give that look that everybody with a black mom recognizes was usually the prelude to a problem. I recognized it. I think everybody recognized it. She was Kamala in that moment. And I think that look and that moment and that sequence of events was very bad for Donald Trump, because the one thing Pence was supposed to do and what he did in 2016 was to soften Donald Trump for women voters, for white women voters. He doesn't have black women. He'll never get them. But he, to get white suburban women to at least consider maybe not abandoning him that voted for him before, this didn't help.
The other thing, so the only time that these debates have mattered are when the presidential candidate has stumbled dramatically. So Vice President Cheney's performance really mattered in 2004 because Bush bombed so badly. I think Vice President Biden's performance, I think David Plouffe would say, mattered in 2012 because President Obama hadn't really seemed that into
first
it.
debate. Yeah.
This could have mattered. I don't think it did. But I don't think, the women are gone. Tim Alberto wrote a piece earlier this week and tweeted today that the collapse that Trump is seeing in the polling is because white college-educated women have fled and all white women have fled this ticket. The problem tonight is that Vice President Pence appeared flaccid and anemic, and that's going to hurt him with men. The only people that they still had in their coalition after last week's barn burner from Trump were the sort of grievance voter that is a very vocal and animated part of the Trump base. This performance will not land well with them. The only time he sprung to life tonight, and I wonder if the social media and the background conversations with people in contact with anyone in Trump orbit are all about whether or not it's the steroid rage or just Donald Trump, feeling grumpy about the polls that's driving his performance. I think there are going to be questions about whether he's not feeling that great after this performance.
Because
anemic.
you think even for him, this isn't just his style?
The only time that he came to life was when he prosecuted Senator Harris for not answering his questions. Right. And again, he hadn't yet responded in full to a single question from the moderator.
So, yeah, you did hear Nicole Wallace claim that Vice President Mike Pence was flaccid, and then saying that it was actually going to be the male viewers who were going to be upset that he was so flaccid. I'm not sure exactly why the male view. I don't know. I guess maybe it's a LGBTQ analysis that it's. I don't know. Does Mike Pence have like a big gay viewership who are going to be upset that he's so flaccid? I would think it's more like the women who Joy Reid was talking about, who Mike Pence was losing by mansplaining and over talking and. Anyway, you can let me know what you think about that Rachel Maddow, Joy Reid, Nicole Wallace analysis at the end of the debate, which talked about the fly, talked about the pink eye, talked about the mansplaining. You can let me know which of those issues you think is most memorable from the vice presidential debate. But as I mentioned earlier, of the big five corporate outlets, the only outlet that I never saw mention the fly was the ABC post-debate discussion. George Stephanopoulos, David Muir, additional pundits. They didn't mention the fly, but they actually brought in a doctor to talk about the pink eye, conjunctivitis, whatever you want to call it, actually telling us it might be a symptom of COVID-19, since Mike Pence has he's not out of the woods, just like Trump isn't out of the woods in terms of his COVID-19 diagnosis, where it's actually this weekend where he may take a big downturn. I mean, I'm not hoping that happens, but it's definitely a significant possibility, given that's like the 7 to 10 day range where people who get, he's on all these steroids now and he feels great. He apparently, various news outlets are reporting he doesn't think he's contagious, for what that's worth, which is worth nothing. But he feels great, but he may actually be the super spreader, and he has had contact with Vice President Mike Pence and Karen Pence, who, like I said in all the other news commentary clips after the debate, none of them mentioned Karen Pence not wearing a mask. Doug Emhoff is wearing a mask at the beginning of this ABC News analysis. They never actually mentioned the fly, even though I watched it through like 2 commercial breaks. I don't know if they ever got to it. After the 2 commercial breaks, my local news cut in, so maybe there was more ABC News commentary where they eventually mentioned the fly, and I didn't see it, but I will give them credit for by the end of this clip, they bring in a doctor to say that pink eye, conjunctivitis, whatever was going on with Mike Pence, could be a symptom of COVID-19. And for people who couldn't see the pink eye in any of the debate clips I showed, well, ABC zooms in on the pink eye. You can't miss it in the final debate reaction from the big five corporate outlets, the ABC reaction over here.
And that is the end of the vice presidential debate right there. What a difference a week makes. 2 very different personalities on the stage tonight. They showed their personalities throughout the debate, both by what they said and didn't say, how they reacted when their opponent was talking. Both candidates likely more effective in attacking their opponents than defending. the records of their principals. Some informed questions from the moderator, Susan Page, but the candidates often ignored her when they were answering the question, didn't answer those questions at all. Kamala Harris scoring on the coronavirus, healthcare, and Russia. Mike Pence trying to steer things back to the economy and taxes. And David Muir, you're here. You said at the beginning, coronavirus front and center. It was.
Yeah, it is the backdrop of what we're going through in this country and the prism through which we're looking at all of these issues. And as you said, George, for the millions of Americans who wondered what last week was, where was the debate? They got a debate tonight. There was a stark contrast, I should say, on taxes, climate change, Supreme Court. But as you mentioned, pandemic right out of the gate. And you heard Senator Harris say the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. That was her first line out of the gate tonight. She talked about the 210,000 lives. She talked about the audio of the president acknowledging that he knew that this was lethal and airborne, which we have been reporting on just in recent days with CDC guidance. And why did the American people not hear this from the Trump-Pence administration far earlier than the March date that she cited? You heard what the vice president said in response, and we knew this would happen going into this debate. He has defended President Trump. He's been very effective in his role as vice president in that way. He said President Trump put the health of America first. He talked about suspending travel from China, had mentioned what Joe Biden has said about that in the past, and he pivoted to the future on vaccines. And the question then went back to Senator Harris, will you take the vaccine if there is one by the end of the year? She said, if Dr. Fauci and the other doctors say, take it, I'll be first in line. She said, if Donald Trump tells me to take that vaccine, I will not take it.
Lindsay, Dave, you said at the start, which Kamala Harris will we get, the prosecutor or not? Did we get it?
Not as much as I thought. I mean, I think it was part prosecutor, part fact check, part presidential interview. At the same time, she allowed Vice President Pence to be rather evasive and not necessarily answer the questions as he was asked. At one point, he was asked about health care. He answered about the Supreme Court. He was asked about China. He answered about NAFTA. And yet it was Pence who actually really held her feet to the fire. At one point, he said, I just want the record to reflect she never answered the question. He was referring, of course, to the Supreme Court. One thing I thought was interesting, in 2016, there was an analyst who said that the VP debate at that time, the matchup was like Miracle Whip versus mayonnaise. I think that was not what we got at all tonight. I think that Kamala Harris was rather spicy. And fortunately, this was more about policy than it was personality.
No question. They covered a lot more policy ground. Again, did not necessarily get all those questions answered over the course of the 90 minutes, but many more topics were addressed. And before we get to more on that, I do, though, want to bring in Dr. Jen Ashton, because it was all over social media during the debate. A lot of people noticing that Mike Pence appeared to have some kind of pink eye. What did you notice?
Well, George, you're not going to be surprised to hear me say this, but of course, no one can make any diagnosis over TV. But what do we know about ocular or eye manifestations in COVID? It has been reported, even though it's limited in the medical literature, that anywhere from 11 to 30% of COVID positive patients can have pink eye. It can be an early sign, but George, he also could have just had some makeup in his eye.
Right. So we've put the questions to the vice president's office. We'll see what they say about that.
So, like I said, ABC never got to the fly, but they did have a doctor talk about the pink eye, conjunctivitis, whatever, and how it might be a symptom of COVID. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I've been watching the live viewers along the way. I saw that Tommy Bone gave a super chat contribution. Lulu Girl, happy birthday, Peter. Matthew gave 2 at the end there. Dandy, and apparently it would be hilarious if there was a fly that could land on me during this live stream, but I've been keeping the doors closed most of the time. We have really bad air out here. There have been a couple days where the air is like somewhat breathable, but I'm in the middle of all the wildfires. By the way, there was a whole section on climate change where Mike Pence tried to defend the Trump administration position that it's all about forest management and not about climate change. And he says, he was asked multiple times, like, is climate change an existential crisis? Was like the final question. He's like, the climate is changing. We're going to follow the science. But didn't answer the question, of course, on man-made climate change. Like I said, at links down in the video description, you can watch the entire debate. I've also put links down in there to all the big 5 corporate outlets. I don't know how much of their commentary on the debate they've uploaded, but anyway, that's just something I do to help defend against copyright claims from corporations. I'm in the middle of a couple big claims from CBS right now. I didn't want to get into all of that, but anyway, that was the final news clip. I think I gave my political commentary and media criticism on the debate clips, the corporate news clips, and I did say I was going to have a Dandy or Dash and Sandy clip to give you all. And let me import that video here for the end. This is actually from yesterday before the vice presidential debate in the afternoon. I found this clip of Dash the cat likes to lie in this sunspot and is very happy not to move at all, even when Sandy the dog comes by and sniffs right on Dash's body. But Dash is going to stay in that sunspot because Dash really loves being in the sunspot. In the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip I'm going to end the show with over here. And that's the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip to end the show with. The special debate clip roundup. I'm going to check to see how messed up the archive of this live stream is because of the buffering issues. If it's too messed up, I may upload the recorded version as a premiere video. That means in a couple hours I will watch that premiere video with any of you or anyone else who shows up to watch it, and then I can actually comment. I can be live in the comment section. That's what I did with the first presidential debate. I'll check it out, see if I have time to do that, or if I should just stick with the archive version of this live stream, even if it has a couple little buffering glitches. Whatever, you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. For the live commenters, if you think I should stick with this archive so your live comments can scroll along with the video, if it's worth it to stick with the glitches, whatever. Anyway, I will be back on Sunday. I'm sure there'll be multiple news cycles. We'll know more about whether there are going to be more presidential debates, and who knows what will happen between now and Sunday. But I will be back on Sunday with my Sunday live clip roundup. Number what are we up to? Oh, I think it's going to be number 390 episodes of LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup. That's what's waiting for you on Sunday. Until then, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.